ask anybody's question but yours. You're an idiot. And really a disloyal person.
Welcome, everyone, to the Disloyal Idiots podcast here on the Fans First Sports Network. Happy Super Bowl Monday to those who are in celebration. I'm Christian Guzman, joined this week by Mike Ostrowski. Steve Haller will be joining us later. Andy Predator is still recovering from Arsenal-induced alcoholness because his Premier League team is doing well, unlike mine and Steve's. Mike doesn't have a Premier League team. He does have a football team, though. Neither of our football teams were in Las Vegas.
No, but Steelers legend Ray McLeod was. He had a nice catch, so there's something at least.
Jets legend McCall Hardman was definitely in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
So McCall Hardman was not the best wide receiver during Kansas City's first part of their reign, but he was certainly a useful role piece / part. And the fact that the Jets couldn't make him fit into some sort of role part in their system is so sad and makes me hate Nathaniel Hackett with a burning, deep passion. But it looks like both of our franchises have awful offensive coordinators now, so that really doesn't matter.
That's implying the Steelers had a competent OC anytime the last, 6 years.
This is probably the case. But let's edge off the football talk for a little bit until Steve rejoins us here on the pod, because it is now firmly basketball season. Syracuse, as always, is on the bubble. Which bubble that is, we don't know yet, but it is certainly on a bubble of sorts. And the bubble for Syracuse got that much harder to stay on a couple of weeks ago because of the dismissal of Benny Williams from the program. We haven't had a chance to talk about this on the pod since that news dropped a couple of weeks ago. And based on the games that have played out since that news dropped, it's been pretty significant, the impact that has had on the Syracuse rotation. But first of all, let's just talk about the Benny Williams part about this, because you could probably see this coming based on just how the season started and the up and down season, both on and off the court, that Benny had this season in what was supposed to be a pretty breakout junior year for him.
Yeah, extremely. He was the only returning player with 2 years of experience on the program. Definitely was being counted on to have a big role this year. Then only does he not end up starting at the beginning of the year, dealing with his 3-game suspension. He had several clashes with Autry throughout the season, and I think whether it was the kind of shoulder shove at Wake Forest, the not staying for the handshake line after, or something else that boiled over, it was just time. I feel like you got enough chances. There's probably some more behind the scenes that took place that really cemented Adrian Autry's decision to move on, and I highly doubt it was an easy decision to make. You already see these last 2 games just how depleted the Orange rotation is. They needed a guy like Benny just to not completely gas their starting 6-man rotation, but they are where they are now. They're gonna have to make the best of it, and I think ultimately some team's gonna take a chance on Benny again in the offseason. We'll be seeing him again somewhere next fall, but it's really just a disappointing end to someone that had such high hopes when he first came into the program. I'm not just talking about the 5-star. Was he really a 5-star? That talk. I don't care about that. What I care about is that he had the tools to be a great college basketball player, and it just didn't work in Syracuse.
And he was whether he was a 5-star or not, he was still a top 50 recruit in the nation when he initially committed to Syracuse. And I think by the time the rankings all unfolded, he was still squarely in the top 50 in most of the recruiting sites. Some of them, were low 40s, high 30s in terms of Benny's rankings. So there was some significant hype coming out of Benny, and it probably also didn't help that he was the only one in his class when he committed. And in this day and age of college basketball, you kind of expect the freshmen and any newcomers to come in and make an instant impact, such as the nature of how many one and dones there are in every program around the nation, not just your Dukes and Kansases. But now you're seeing some more of those trickle down into the lower parts of the SEC and the ACC as well. And so I think a lot of people, when you see that type of ranking come in from a recruit, you kind of expect that production to kind of come up from Benny. And certainly that didn't happen from him. And I think that's where a lot of the disappointment so far comes from Benny, is that he never really reached that potential that seemed was laid out for him.
And if anything, he took one or two steps back this year, just in terms of his points per game, his playing time, not really ever winning the starting job back from Justin Taylor. There were absolutely nights where he played more minutes than Justin Taylor, and I think he did a good job closing out games. He was better suited to come off the bench and be that 6A, 6B guy in Red system, but ultimately just not what he was expected to be. And again, I don't hold anything against them. We don't know the whole story of what happened. And again, just got to move on at this point. And I think after the first game back, it was tough, which is not a great sign, a tough game against Louisville, but the team responded pretty well. I'll be completely honest. I think they understood, Red sent a message. They understood the message. Even within the game, Chris Bell, he was having a heck of a shooting game, ended up with a career high 30, but even he got benched very briefly for not playing the boards on defense. Well, message received, got a crucial block late in the game, and then he motioned to Autry saying, "I got you, coach." That's the kind of mentality you got to have moving forward. It's not going to be an easy finish to the season for these guys, but there are still several winnable games on the schedule. Maybe not tomorrow night, but get through that in one piece, and then we could start talking again.
But the big thing also, and as Steve Howard now joins us on the pod, we're immediately going to hit the Steve is old quota, because I'm not sure that Boeheim, or I don't even remember a time just in just the general era of Syracuse Orange basketball, where there was a person who was dismissed from the program in general, and a person who was dismissed from the program in terms of their importance, in terms of the minutes that they got on the squad. I mean, the last person was Gino Thorpe, but he was a transfer coming in, didn't really see that many minutes, and left only after about 5 games into the season. So it's definitely not the same impact as a guy like Benny had on the rotation.
Yeah, no, I guess we're going to hit the Steve is old button on the first thing that immediately popped into my mind when this all went down was Deshaun Williams back in 2002. Hence where Kevin decided to drop the tweet where we're winning the national title next year, because the last time a Williams was dismissed from the program, we won the title the next year. Which, hey, I'm fine with that. However, back in the day, I mean, in 2001, 2002, Deshaun Williams was literally just controversy on and off the court. There was a bunch of stuff that went down between him and Preston Shumpert at the time, and it led to rifts in the locker room. It led to all sorts of other things. He was dismissed from the team. One thing led to another. Again, the standard, and I'm sure we'll touch on this more later, but the standard he said, she said, whatever happened. But one way or another, that was the immediate thought in my brain was, especially watching the team's performance over the last couple of weeks, kind of mirrored like, hey, we're getting things together. Oh, everything fell off a cliff. And that was very similar to that 2001, 2002 team where everybody was, finally gelling, and then they just couldn't put it together the rest of the year. And then Williams was ultimately dismissed from the program. So I have no idea what Benny did outside of like the death from 1,000 cuts that we can kind of discern. But it seems like a situation that, maybe it ends up with Red sending his message and, everything is hunky-dory from here on out, or I don't know. We have no idea at this point.
But as Mike said, this is, and as you said, Steve, this is message sent by Red. But then, as you just pointed out, Mike, this is a team that now has to recover without a another definitive big man that they can put on the floor at all times. I mean, really, the most natural one is Malik Brown, who you can really trust with significant minutes. Peter Carey's now injured. Morning Hema has been getting very sporadic minutes this year. So, and now you see how much that is an issue in both the
Will
Louisville and
Patterson
Clemson.
somewhere exists.
It's reported that they're trying to redshirt Patterson this year, which is why he has not featured or played. So that would explain
I
everything.
mean, at this point, we're less than 20% of games left. Like, start running them.
That might be towards the end of the season, but from what it sounds like, they're going to keep him on the bench, which fine, I guess, but unfortunately, that's what it is for Syracuse, and we saw it against Louisville, and we saw it against Clemson. That was a too close for comfort Louisville game that Syracuse, under normal circumstances, on paper, probably should have won a lot more easily than it did. And then we saw what happened against Clemson, where apparently offense ceased to exist at certain points in that game for Syracuse.
Yeah, just a quick note on Patterson. He did warm up before the Clemson game, which was the first time I really saw him warming up in. I'm serious. The first time I saw him warming up in uniform, not just like a tank top or something. Like he was apparently
He was
ready.
actually dressed.
He was actually dressed, and it seemed like he was like ready to go if Hima's back gave out. Like I don't mean to word it like that, but if they desperately needed a center for 5 or 10 minutes, they were pretty much prepared to do it.
So it's tough because you see now like how much, unfortunately, Benny's absence has on the rotation. There isn't a great plan B that Syracuse can go to right now. It's just ultimate small ball, and the way that Syracuse just kind of is, the weaknesses of this team feel like they get more pronounced, especially with a shorter rotation and a smaller lineup more frequently. And that's kind of what we've been seeing in these last two games.
So Syracuse team has position group that consists of large human beings, effectively non-existent by the midway point of the season. Does this sound familiar to anyone?
I mean, I've only been here 4 years, and yeah, it's ringing a pretty familiar bell.
This large human being group of, like, theoretically also didn't have 900 injuries to start the year with in the first place also.
Yeah, it's just I don't know, like it always brings up the what is Orange Strength and Conditioning doing or not doing, as the case may be. And again, something we will likely never know. But yeah, it always boggles my mind every single time.
It's the tough thing right now is that I kind of made the comparison, like not joking, like with some sincerity at the beginning of the year, that Malik Brown was Mark Dolezaj 2.0, and that's becoming clearer and clearer by the day, because not only is Brown mirroring Dolezaj in terms of his game production, but he's also now mirroring him in terms of his importance on the team. As when you saw Marek on the floor, he was going to be your 5 no matter what. He was never going to. I don't think there was going to be a world again where he was going to play the 4, because he was clearly, his clear best position was at the 5, which is weird to say for a guy that's quote unquote small and lanky. And now we're at that same position with Brown, where his most natural position will probably be the 4, but in this Syracuse system, it has to be the 5. And that means that, unfortunately, you cannot play Brown and a healthy combination of McLeod, Hema, or Carey on the floor at the same time.
Well, and especially when we start to, and prognostication central here, when we start to look towards next year, when you have recently dubbed top 10 player, Donnie Freeman, coming in at the power forward slot. So what are you going to shift Brown back to the spot that you have the stud kid coming in? I don't know. It all seems weird, and it's mildly hilarious. I believe like 2 weeks ago on the pod, we were talking about Freeman, and then immediately after we were like, yeah, he should come in and have an impact, but we don't know if he's going to be, all world or a starter or whatever. He gets upgraded to the 9th best player in the class. So that's fitting.
Currently he's On3's number 1 power forward in the class of 2024 coming in. He seems more like a stretch forward than a traditional power forward. So it will be interesting to see how that fits in with Syracuse's rotation. You would assume that Red is going to hit the transfer portal once again and trying to get some beef up at least some beef in his front court rotation.
I mean, he needs a center that is not a project guy like Naheem, but yes, also some beef in the front court. Maybe this is a hot take. It wouldn't surprise me that much if Malik tries to go pro after this year. I know he still has a lot to work on. I think his shot is the one thing that needs to develop the most. But honestly, that's the one thing the NBA actually teaches is the shot. He's a great defender. He's a great all-around fundamental basketball player. And me and Kevin actually had this discussion not too long ago about how we both think out of the current guys, he's the one that's going to have a pretty substantial NBA career. Maybe not like a name face, but someone who can play off the bench for a handful of seasons.
And did you think you were going to say that at the beginning of the year?
Oh, no way. No.
Because now that brings us nicely into another topic. It's been about a year since I wrote a piece on the site called Judah Mintz's Dilemma, where last year was seemingly that there was a more than 50% chance that Mintz would declare for the NBA draft. We know what has happened since then. He has not declared for the draft. He has come back to Syracuse for his second year, and his second year at Orange has delivered mixed results on both extremes, I would say. Sure, there is more of the skills that the NBA likes to see, the slashing to the hoop, the driving, the ability to create fouls and get to the free throw line. But then there's the other side, which is the shot that still hasn't developed, and now even more so, sometimes the over-aggressiveness on defense and the fouls that sometimes don't make sense, which maybe lowers his case a little bit as well. How is his stock now involved? Because right now it feels like to me that it's still a very, very murky situation on whether he should once again decide if he even wants to test the waters right now.
I unfortunately think his stock has dipped this year.
Yeah, me too.
Because the main thing to me that's still a huge concern is most nights, emphasis on most nights, he is great at drawing the contact and getting the line. But when he's not getting those calls, he can go ice cold. It seems like much more often than not, he needs to get that first set of free throws off before he can step up his game and start working the mid-range a bit, start driving and not just worrying about the contact. If he's got an open lane, sometimes he'll hesitate. And all that put together is not what you would expect from from making the jump to freshman to sophomore. It seems like he's actually regressed a bit in that area where last year, maybe the pressure wasn't on him quite as much because it was a collective big freshman class. But now with him being the the established NBA prospect of the group, will say, there have been times where he tries to put the game on his back and it just doesn't work.
And that's going into the year, the biggest question was his shot. And he has done little to nothing to alter the perception of his ability to shoot the ball. So where is he going anywhere but down when what was a strength of his game is, not as consistent as it was last year?
And I think also something that has to be taken into consideration is he's supposed to be a point guard. And it feels like also just based on my limited viewing of Syracuse basketball, that his passing has also taken a dip this year in terms of from last season as well. It felt like he was creating a lot more chances last year for other people to score. And that not necessarily hasn't been the case this year, both in terms of passes that lead to a score and just the frequency of passes in general. And it feels like there's a lot more ISO ball and hero ball this year than there was last year. And there was already a lot of hero ball last year
And
from
that's
Mintz.
a piece of it, though, is like him driving, and like Mike said a minute ago, he's looking for that contact instead of being open to, if the contact's there, take the contact, otherwise dish it to the open guy. And there's not that extra facet to the game that there could be, or that there needs to be, for him to play at that next level.
And some of it I truly think is mental. Like he is now, without a doubt, the number one scorer on the team, and especially going back to the beginning of the year when JJ Starling was pretty ice cold in those first couple of weeks. I think that particularly got in his head of, I've got to be the guy to put up close to 20 a night, no matter how I do it. And that's when he starts to force it a little too much, instead of looking like, yeah, you maybe don't have Joe who can shoot 40% from deep on the wings, and you don't have necessarily the physicality in the middle you had with Jesse, but the rest of the guys on this team can still score. I know Bell's hot and cold, but Malik, I think, does not get enough action inside the paint. He can put up more than the 8 or 9 points a night that we see most nights. There are other guys that can create some space, and he's just not always looking for them. And when he is looking for them, that's when JJ's had some of his best games, is when Judah's playing the facilitator role. He's still getting, and that's the thing, in those games, he's still getting to the line even while he's playing facilitator. That's what he needs to realize, is that I can still put up 15 to 20 while dishing the ball out to the open man.
And it feels like Judah wants to put up 25 to 30 instead of 15 to 20.
Yeah,
right. Whereas 15 to 20 with 10 dishes would be more impressive than just racking the score sheet up.
There's a reason why we liked Brown's 5x5 game a lot more than noticing another high teens, low 20s game from Mintz.
Or even Bell's 30.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
The
storyline from that Louisville game was Brown's 5x5 stat line.
Yeah. What Mintz is doing, and we're saying all this, Mintz is an absolute talent, and he is a phenomenal player. It's just where he's fitting in and what he's doing this year. And it reminds me a lot of dare I say 2007-ish Demetrius Nichols or Devendorf, when they would get it in their head that they had to be the guy, and sometimes to the fault of whatever else was going on, it got in their head, and that's what they were doing, when in actuality they were better playing within the flow. And that's, I guess if I'm going back to 2007, that's a Steve is old too. So I wish we had a drop for that. But yeah, I don't know. I think we are dissecting it as much because we're as frustrated with it because we've seen what he can do.
And I think we're also frustrated with it because of just the extremely tough schedule that is now coming up for Syracuse basketball, as we pull it up on the screen right now with the net rankings alongside it. We know what's coming up tomorrow. We're recording this on Monday, Super Bowl Monday. This is what's coming up tomorrow. If you're watching on the stream, you can see it pulled up right now. If it's not watching on the stream, again, you can catch the VOD on YouTube at Disloyal Idiots. North Carolina, the number 10 team in the net. By the way, Syracuse is now dropped to 90 in the net. That is 9-0 in the net.
It's not great, Bob.
It is not great. And now you're facing the number 7 team in the land, the number 10 team in the net, coming to the Dome on Tuesday.
To be fair, a loss here may help us in the net.
Well, as long as it's not by 20, that could be the case. Who knows? But then you've got, the 3 games that you should win in Tech, Notre Dame, and Louisville. This Virginia Tech game was maybe looking like a favorable, it could have been a win a couple weeks ago. Now that's not likely the case. And so, once again, it now comes down to kind of what I said last week, or the last time we did this pod. I'm not sure this Clemson game is a win anymore.
No,
It's got to be.
After you lose at home, you can't
Yeah.
pencil in as a win. It could happen, but not betting on it. Right
Not
now.
likely. So now, in order to keep bubble hopes alive for both either the NCAA or the NIT, you've got to win this game at North Carolina State next week.
It always comes down to Syracuse and North Carolina State, doesn't it?
Yes. And this also means that I think also this game against North Carolina State, you need to win this just to give you a chance to even stay in the bubble with a win in the tournament as well. You need at very least the 4 wins against Georgia Tech, North Carolina State, Virginia Tech, not Virginia Tech, Notre Dame, and Louisville. And you need 1, maybe 2 wins just to be on NIT conversation.
I mean, I'd honestly say 2 at this point.
Yeah, probably.
Sure.
Yeah, not looking wonderful there.
So it is not looking great for Syracuse right now in terms of its potential for postseason basketball. Which is, in terms of it, I think a lot of people had hope based on the talent that was coming back with Autry. It was always going to be an uphill struggle, and even more so now it is. It's tough to. It'll be easier to put a cap on what the first season under Autry has been like when the season is done. But right now, I think it's still very, very inconclusive on whether this season's been successful or not under Autry, just based on what has happened on and what talent he's had available.
Yeah, we could sit here and say broken record or something like that, but let's be honest. Like, there's already been some improvement from the Orange compared to the last 2 seasons, even while dealing with kind of the fallout of what to me still seems like Jim Boeheim thinking he was still going to be here this year, and kind of structuring the previous class around that, so that they were all project guys for the most part, except for Judah. I'll give him that. And now, while 2 of your big guys from last year are gone, you've got injuries piling up. And even with that, this team, with a couple more wins down the stretch, will finish with a better record than last year. So you're already making some improvement. That's with 2 extra ranked games in Hawaii, which any first-year head coach probably didn't want. So all things considered, I'm happy. As opposed to the last 2 years where it was just, we're doing the exact same thing again. This year, it's, okay, I see what Red's trying to do. It's not going to happen overnight, but you know what? I appreciate that he's being dead serious with what he's doing. He's going for effort above everything else, and I think that's the right message to send right now.
Oh, it'll be an interesting time to see how Syracuse basketball develops. What's also developing is your wardrobe collection when it's sponsored by Home Field Apparel, our sponsors for this Disloyal Idiots podcast. You can always go to homefieldapparel.com and get the very best Syracuse vintage gear, bomber jackets, sweatpants, you name it. They've probably got it for you in terms of your great Syracuse throwback apparel. You can go there and use the code NUNES23, that's NUNES 23 at checkout for 10% off your very first purchase at homefieldapparel.com.
Now all Fran needs to do is start getting that NIL in, because you see Home Field launch that.
Yes, the Home Field NIL Collective, where if you are a first-time buyer of Home Field Apparel, or if one of your friends is a first-time buyer of Home Field Apparel, Home Field will actually donate some of that money made to an NIL collective that they are now starting with a couple of schools. Syracuse not there yet, But if your favorite school is on their home field NIL collective, you can check out their social medias to find the school that is right for you if you so wish to help them along.
Yeah, those schools would happen to be Indiana. Go figure.
No, what? Really?
Purdue, also go figure.
Yeah.
Florida, Georgia, and Kansas State. So yeah, if the good people at Syracuse could get some sort of connection going with the good brand, I would be very happy.
Because it will allow people like Adrian Autry and Fran Brown to use that NIL money to either keep or entice players to come play for the Syracuse Orange. And football season might just have ended, but football season is still right around the corner, as it always is.
So
And
when I joined the pod, because I was a couple minutes late, when I joined the pod and heard what you guys were talking about, I couldn't for at least a minute and a half to 2 minutes decide whether we were on football or basketball. So we've already hit the basketball news. Yeah. Should we go with the football dismissal?
we do. We now also hit the football news. If you haven't paid attention to the title of the podcast, of course, is may or may not have been dismissed by the program, because we actually learned news today. Again, Monday, Super Bowl Monday. We are recording this. If you are listening on your podcast platform of choice, is that the news today dropped that Damien Alford has been dismissed by the program. This was a report that came out by ESPN's Pete Thamel and later several news outlets, including Syracuse.com's Emily Leichler and CNY Central's Ashley Wenskowski confirmed that a Syracuse team's spokesperson had confirmed that report that Alford was dismissed from the program, which is significant news because Alford has been in the top 3 in receiving yards in each of his full seasons with Syracuse. He was the leading receiver last year in terms of catches and receiving yards, tied for the team lead in receiving touchdowns. And while there's a lot of talent coming in to that receiving room and also coming back, Alford was set to be one of those veteran voices who had also a physical skill set that is not easy to teach or even replicate just in general. So it is an interesting loss for the program. And unfortunately, we do not know much about the nature of the dismissal. But this is, let's just put it again that way. It's interesting.
It is. It's the whole thing is.
Yes.
Mike, I know you were gearing to chime in, so I'll let you fire away first.
All right, I'll cue in. Based on what we've been told from a since-deleted tweet, it appears that Damien Alford went to Coach Fran Brown, basically saying that he was going to stay through the semester, graduate, and then most likely transfer out after that. That tweet was up for about an hour and then got taken down. Then Brown basically came out and said, Damien's a good guy. We wish him the best wherever he goes. But the program is still using the term dismissed. So taking my best guess at what happened, again, guess, wasn't in the room with these guys. Don't have a hidden camera anywhere or anything like that. From just based on Fran's demeanor and what his message has been since taking over the program, if Damien already had 1 foot out the door and there was some time in between, because this happened on Friday when Damien went to speak with Brown, according to that deleted tweet that's saying, like, I'm going to look to transfer at the end of the semester. I just take it that Fran doesn't want anyone in the spring camp who's not fully engaged with the team. I hope it's not that there was any bad blood in the short time they've been together and that this was handled internally in that hour or so in between the tweet going up and then it going down, Fran putting his own tweet up. But that's what I make of it. I don't think this is a huge of a deal as some people are making it. Damien was a good player who had some great flashes, but never really put it all together. And somebody's going to give him a shot next year. This just seems like there was some miscommunication somewhere along the lines, and we got to hope it doesn't happen again. But I don't know. Either you guys want to chime in?
Well, Canada is not New Jersey, so that was the problem.
Well,
100%.
we are still recruiting Canada, Steve. Don't worry.
Oh, okay. No, it seems like you said, it seems like one of those where it's I think I said it before, but like the standard he said, she said, that we'll never know what actually went down or how things all played out. But it, at least on the public front, seems to be in at least an amiable spot at this point. I mean, Alford being dismissed from the program as a captain, like it had to have been some sort of something in it, or it was a nothing burger that, like, I don't know. I'm just going to keep spinning my wheels because I have no idea what the actuality is. What you said is probably the most likely scenario, Mike, where it was just a, semantic misunderstanding here and there or whatever. Fran not wanting him taking reps in the spring game or spring ball if he's not going to be around in the fall is completely valid. But yeah, I don't know. Christian, you got anything definitive or
Not really, in terms of like why.
Yeah.
I don't want to put too much speculation, especially over a deleted tweet. It's an interesting context, but thinking this will be another one of those he said, she said, probably type of things that we can't really gain that much information from. The interesting thing is going to be that Syracuse and its wide receiver core, at least, now finds itself into a very similar position that Syracuse basketball kind of finds itself in. It's that's a young receiver core. And yeah, you have a veteran quarterback throwing to them, but it's also his first time in the system. It's the first time that Jeff Nixon is returning to the college ranks in some time. This will be interesting to see how that Syracuse receiver core develops, especially since the wide receivers are all going to be very, very young and inexperienced in terms of being the alpha guys in a collegiate setting. And this is indeed excluding Jamie Tremble and Arande Gadsden, who are question mark, who knows how they'll actually be used.
Well, you have what, basically Trevor Pena?
Umari's got a couple years into. I know it's
true.
not like he's not as much as Alford, but I think he went a little under the radar last year. He had a pretty solid season, all things considered.
And that kind of just also alludes to the point that like none of those guys have been kind of the go-to guys in a collegiate setting, which is probably is going to be something that Kyle McCord is going to have to adjust to, because he's not throwing to Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously, but like the guys that he's going to be throwing to don't necessarily have the same experience in terms of going up and making a play, and in terms of getting that separation against some of the best of the best. And so it'll be interesting to see who eventually comes out and commands the number one role as the primary X receiver, as we assumed that was going to be Alford's job this year.
Right. And I mean, with no other context, I would not look past the two Georgia transfers. Also, Brown is making moves, Hatcher, like Mike mentioned, and then I forgot Long has been here as much as he has as well.
Yeah, but he hasn't really played.
No, but like he was a name to watch like 2 years ago, and then kind of didn't show much last year. So I don't know what to make of that either. But yeah, there's not too many. If you look at this column here, there's not much going on there.
So now really it kind of goes back to the question of what do you want to do with the two freak athletes at tight end in Gadsden and Tremble.
Right.
Do you kind of move those guys back to the wide receiver room where they're kind of more naturally known as? Or do you keep them at tight end and kind of try and play the matchup game that you kind of like modern tight ends to kind of be molded into, a la Kelsey and Kittle?
I mean, there's this crazy formation with multiple tight ends. I know it's a little foreign for Syracuse football, but it exists.
When's the last time you've seen Syracuse football go to a X2 formation and pass out of said formation?
I want to say maybe a little bit in 2018. I'm trying to remember who their number 2 was then.
The Hackett and Benson years, potentially, yes, but
yeah.
But they never used the two of them together.
No, it was either one or the other.
I've highlighted the answer to all of our problems.
This is indeed a answer that could potentially be.
This is a answer.
You have identified an answer.
We're skipping the X2 and just going right to the 3 tight end sets.
Perfect. All tight ends all the time. We need Thunder Dan and Tremble and Arande on the field at the same time.
I made that joke of running full house formations. Are we actually going to see that?
You know what? Throw David Clement in there and just go for all height.
Totally honest, Clement looked good in last year's spring camp, and I was hoping we were going to see a little more of him than we did. But
so what you're saying is that Syracuse is building a really good tush-push roster.
100%. Just throw all 4 of them out there. They're all talented enough that you can split some, you can run some in the slot. You're going quads with all tight ends. Yeah, I think we can do it.
See, the problem with that is then you're just lining Allen back under the Wildcat again to do it, because you're not having Kyle McCord run the tush push.
Point.
No, but if you're going to have those guys there, you might as well, whoever takes the snap, and then just toss that guy like a javelin over the line and hope for the best.
So we're going fastball special.
Yes.
Oh God. All right. So,
this is what football talk has devolved into, ladies and gentlemen.
X-Men references, of course. That's where it goes. And that's without Andy on the pod.
This is that's a miracle right there.
So yeah, I guess I can change my change this.
So what Steve is changing for those podcast listeners is obviously taking Damien Alford out of the spreadsheet and now also taking a scholarship player off the spreadsheet, because something that has kind of been quietly been noticed, not just by Steve, but now by a couple other people, is that scholarship breakdown is going to be very, very interesting for Syracuse. On the screen right now, the projected, from what we understand and probably know or could give a good estimation, is that there are 88 scholarship players on Syracuse's roster right now. And the limit is 85, correct?
Mm.
So Syracuse still needs to find a way to actually trim that. Luckily, unlike in years past, this is probably where the advantageous position of having a later spring ball helps, because you have a little bit of time before now in spring ball to try and trim that roster. And also, you also have the dilemma of pieces you still want to add, because it feels like, just in my general assumption, that Fran Brown wants to add at least one other offensive lineman to kind of help with that issue from last year.
Yes, please.
I see what Steve is highlighting, and I was kind of thinking the same thing.
Yeah, have we heard anything about one DeMarcus Adams?
I don't think so. Okay. I don't know.
So he walked on senior day, but he does still technically have a 6th year available to him.
I suspect we'll know a lot once we see spring practice rosters.
Right.
Which unfortunately,
it may be a lot of things like that are leading to this number being where it is, of folks that have moved on or are known to be going to move on that we have not, gotten confirmation that they're moving on. So we'll see where that leads. But right now, we're over where we need to be.
Going to be really interesting to see how this gets trimmed and exactly what fashion it gets trimmed by in terms of who's leaving and potentially also who's joining, because we know that Brown is going to bring in more people.
Yep.
I mean, he brought in 2 guys on signing day, for Christ's sake, as well.
Other thing to mildly worry people.
No, don't worry about that.
Does Denneberg not actually have a scholarship?
Not last I saw.
that-
Maybe that's maybe that works out. Or
We should.
maybe because did he come in as a crossover? Like maybe he's listed as both, and I missed him somewhere. He's counted in this number.
Well, he's definitely not a punter. He was
No.
definitely. He was definitely a long. It was definitely a
Because
kickoff
isn't-
specialist.
Because isn't Max von Monberg, isn't he have the other punter
No,
scholarship?
I
now?
believe it's Jason Williams who has the other.
Williams. Okay.
It's Williams who has the others. It's Stonehouse and Williams, I believe, who have these scholarships. Billy von Marburg has a scholarship, so it might be 3 other. Or I'd be surprised if. I honestly would be surprised if. Is Jason Williams not on the team anymore? No, I forgot about that. Then.
Oh, you know why? Because I have that listed as a PK instead of a.
Oh,
That's where that happened.
Steve.
So we're actually at 89 scholarships. Interesting.
Well, that didn't help.
That does not help.
Maybe Von Marburg is not.
I'd be surprised if Von Marburg is.
I thought he was when he came in.
He was absolutely when he came in. So
I don't know. We'll see.
Again, this is what it's come down to: guessing about scholarships.
Yep. And me making weird spreadsheets. All
and
things are right.
me periodically editing those spreadsheets as stuff comes in.
Absolutely.
We honestly don't have to worry about that for a little bit in terms of football stuff.
It's true until after spring ball, right?
Indeed,
Although technically we could get transfer commits
we could.
Yeah.
or outgoing news. So it's just less.
Yes, we have other things to worry about, like other sports that are currently happening on the hill right now. For example, Felicia Legette's Jack's team is still rolling along in the polls and picking up, theoretically, if they pick up a couple more wins, could find themselves within a shout to host the game of the NCAA tournament.
That'd be crazy. For a
And
team
it'd be-
that's supposed to be, 9th in the ACC going into the season?
Something like that, but with a team that was definitely projected as a bubble team by most outlets coming into the NCAA, coming into this season, and not just a bubble team, but a bubble team on the outside looking in. So that projects really well for Felicia Legette, and just her second year as Syracuse head coach, and an impressive turnaround. And she's done a great job in turning around the program after the position it was in 2 years ago.
Incredible job to not just get the talent needed to win it right away, but to build the culture that she's made where it's our family versus their team. Come on, that's an incredible slogan that, again, SU marketing, please market that.
Why would you do that?
Well, it's the same people who don't know about Daisha Fair, who is also just continuing to light up the record books right now. And
look, I'm serious. If they would sell anything Daisha 3K or anything along those lines, I'd buy it. A lot of people would buy it. Just do it already.
Yep. Between that and, like you said, any sort of other random marketing that they could do. Nah.
Well, I guess you know what? The email they send about an hour before the game reminding us, hey, students have free tickets, that's their marketing. Because we definitely don't make plans before an hour before something, right?
No, you're college students. Of course not. You make snap on the fly decisions, especially when it comes to sporting events.
Crazy. Although I am trying to get my son's Cub Scout pack to one of the games to finish out the year here. So
Ooh, that'd be very nice.
we'll see if that actually happens.
Or maybe you bring it to a lacrosse game.
That's
Because
actually what it's come down to, was one or the other. So
Indeed. Because those games are going to be plentiful, especially in the next month or so before dome renovations kick into full gear. And boy, have Syracuse lacrosse, Syracuse and lacrosse just in general, gotten off to a very good start on the men's side. It has been
extremely. Sorry, go ahead.
It is basically what you said. It's been an extremely, extremely positive start to this Syracuse season. And I don't think there's been this much hype around a Syracuse team since the 2020 team that went undefeated before the season shut down.
forgot. I'm not gonna lie, I completely forgot that even happened.
Indeed. I would like to forget that also happened. When, that's just semantics here and there.
I wasn't here yet, so I got to pass.
There you go.
But this is a Syracuse team that not only has performed really well, you've got a certain Joey Spallina setting records, a 10-point game against Manhattan to be the first Syracuse player to do that since a Powell brother in the 2000s, which is insane.
Mm-hmm.
So everything seems to be clicking for Syracuse. Mason Cone feels like he's been the answer at faceoff and has actually scored goals, which is mildly insane to think about as well.
You can do that in the modern game?
Indeed. Especially from the faceoff dot, which is a very interesting thing to do. The transfers, especially on the offensive end with Stevens and English, have performed extremely, extremely well. Will Mark is still Will Mark. And then hopefully the defense holds up in time for the big tests that are coming very, very soon around the corner.
Yeah, speaking very quickly about the transfers, can we just get like a Lehigh Newhouse partnership that every year it's just like your top attacker automatically gets enrolled in the Newhouse grad program? Because I think it's working pretty well so far.
Oh, it's done it twice in a row. Syracuse has found their Southampton feeder team. I keep using the Southampton reference because it's so funny how Southampton has basically given Liverpool so many players that are crucial to
for so long too.
Yes.
Yeah. Like it's not a recent thing. Like it's just been going on and going on and going on.
Indeed. Well, Syracuse has that with Lehigh last year, doing it with Cole Kirst, who is now playing with the Redwoods, and this year with Christian Moulet, who was slotted in nicely as the third attacker on the starting attack line with Spallina and Hiltz. And Spallina and Hiltz are doing mighty fine, but when the fact you have Moulet joining along with them, who I believe was either Lehigh's leading points or leading goal scorer last year, one or the other, or maybe both. I don't remember exactly. But, I mean, it was great for Lehigh when he was there, playing in the Patriot League for the Mountain Hawks and now joining Syracuse and doing very well on that attack line. Now, the big question for Syracuse, once again, is going to be the close defenders who have performed okay. They're above average, I would say, against the lower-ranked opposition. But then this Maryland team, it's Maryland. They're always going to be good. And you know that's going to be a war in the Dome this coming weekend.
Absolutely.
It
Finally,
always is with the Terps.
Always is with the Terps. That will be an interesting thing to see. Finally, on the women's side, unfortunate that Kayla Trainer's squad lost their opening game of the season. A tough one against the Wildcats, the reigning champions of Division I. women's lacrosse, Northwestern up in Chicago, unfortunately dropping that game 18-15. Syracuse trying to make a comeback, couldn't quite do it. But again, this is the reigning champions that they're facing who still have Izzy Skate somehow.
And to their credit, they made it a very close game at the end.
They did indeed make it a very, very close game. And I mean, closer than probably it should have been, but it showed a good fight. You know, I think a lot of pressure will be placed on that kind of three-headed trio of Tyrell and Ward up top, and then Schweitzer in the back. That like those are your clear leaders. And while it's not going to make up for the production that the Meg Show produced over the past couple of years, like it's going to be a tough ask for the Emmas to reproduce that same magic.
Yeah, when I went to do a lacrosse season preview 2 weeks ago with another podcast, and that was the first time it really hit me that we don't have both Tyrell sisters anymore.
Yeah,
this is going to be a very different offensive look without like one of the best players in program history. But this is. I don't know if we call this the last dance. You would have thought last year would have hoped would have been the last dance, but they've still enough talent on this roster to make a run, and they've got the toughest game of the year out of the way. They played well enough that they were in the game, and now this is where it's not easy by any stretch of the imagination with Army, Maryland, Notre Dame, Duke. But the whole to be the best, you got to beat the best and all. We shall see where they are after those next 4 games.
It'll be very, very interesting to see how both teams kind of to navigate the very, very tough schedules that they have. And it's the lacrosse programs with this school. I mean, Syracuse is always going to have a very, very tough schedule and a very, very challenging schedule, no matter who they face and the teams that they come up against. And I mean that's going to be the case for both teams. And again, for the men, it continues this weekend. Really, the crux of their tough schedule now really gets underway with the Terps coming, and then going women's across. They pick themselves up before settling things midweek with Army before themselves going up against Maryland, and then like you said, that really, really tough 4-game stretch of Maryland, Notre Dame, Duke, and Stony Brook. So it'll be interesting to see how the lacrosse programs continue on and trudge on. But that will do it here for the Disloyal Idiots podcast. We thank Mike Ostrowski for joining us as always. Steve is with us. Andy is somewhere. We don't know where, but as always,
Andy exists.
And Andy, like I said, probably still recovering from alcohol-induced happiness from his football team doing well, while Steve and I's football team's not.
And mentally preparing for his American football team to do the same old thing again.
Indeed. At least Steve didn't have to see a former player on his football team make a crucial play for one of the participating teams in the Super Bowl this week. At least I don't think there were any former Bills on either teams. Or if there were, they didn't have any significant impact.
Nothing that sprints into my brain, but yeah.
Again, shout out to Jets legend McCole Hardman.
Yeah, it's not like that year that Sammy Watkins left and then
won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was like, and I was sitting there wearing my Bills Watkins jersey, like, yay.
Winner by proxy. That's how all the Jets fans feel right now. Once
Somebody's
again,
got to do it.
Yep. That'll do it again for the Disloyal Idiots podcast. We thank you all who are watching live on Twitch or Twitter or on YouTube. Usually we do these Sundays at 8 p.m. You can check back and tune in then to catch the live stream if you're watching or if you're listening on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks for listening, and you make sure to give us a like, rating, comment, trick the algorithm so that we can help expand the Ottoman Empire. And if you're watching along on the website on newsposition.com, thank you for checking us out there. And make sure you leave a comment as well to continue the discussion. But for Steve and Mike, I'm Christian Guzman. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching to the Disloyal Idiots podcast here on the Fans First Sports Network. And as always, go Orange.
Go Orange.
Go Orange.